I really wanted to give the EOS R a proper field review. You have to properly use a camera in your specific discipline to get a proper understanding of how it's going to work for you. I shoot landscape photography pretty much exclusively. I don't do portraiture, I don't do sports, I don't do anything other than landscapes. That's all I do. So if you're looking for a review on those sorts of disciplines, this ain't it. I'm not going to be doing that. I don't have the first clue about Canon's colour science when it comes to skin tone. Alright, strap in, get yourself a cup of tea, because I'm going to waffle on for a long time here. The video performance is just unparalleled. One of the things about the 5D2 that really bothered me with video is how often I messed it up. Now you can blame that on user error, of course, but when it comes to things like, you know, something in the frame is happening and you need to get your camera out and shoot it now or you're going to miss it. With the 5D2 you'd have to get it out, you'd have to turn the video mode on, you'd have to wait for the autofocus to find it. If the autofocus couldn't find it, you'd have to manually focus, and then you'd have to zoom in to make sure that you got the focus right, and then you knew that if that object moved further away from you, you'd have to adjust the focus to compensate. It's just crap. It's just a crap experience. I can't tell you the number of times I missed a shot because of that. The EOS R, it doesn't happen. It just works, which is really good. It looks crisp, it looks clear, the colours are good, the sharpness is probably a little too sharp, and likewise a little bit too much contrast. Alright, autofocus. Similar to the video, the autofocus on this camera is ridiculous. It's so good. I knew that I didn't really have to worry about it, and actually sometimes I forgot to autofocus, and because the screen is such a high resolution, it kind of looks like everything's in focus. I just looked at a couple of the images in Lightroom and I've missed the focus on a couple of them, relied too much on the camera, so that's something I'm going to have to be aware of. Now, the camera claims to have some ungodly number of autofocus points, like 5,000 or something like that. And actually, I think it might be correct when it says that. There's this thing where you can set an autofocus point on the screen, I don't know, like a rock or a flower, and as you track the camera around and sort of move it away from the object or closer to the object, you can watch the autofocus points like expanding as the object gets bigger, or compressing as the object gets further away, moving around the frame as you move the camera and pan around. It's quite spectacular actually, especially considering the 5D2 has 9 autofocus points and most of them don't work very well because you need to have like a specific point of contrast on that focus point. With the EOS R, you just go, I want to focus on that, boop, and then it just focuses on that, like even if it's really dark. I think last night, considering I was focusing in the dark, there was only one time when the camera struggled to focus, and that was because the thing that I was trying to focus on was like pitch black. So really impressed with the autofocus. Another thing as well, the face tracking seems to work really well. Now again, I don't do portraiture, but I do shoot a lot of video of me pointing the camera at my face, and again, countless times when I've missed the focus because of that, and like you just go, alright, fine, well that footage will just have to be out of focus. And that's probably lazy, but at the end of the day, if you can get a camera that is just never going to mess up and you don't have to worry about user error, then that's objectively a better experience than a camera that requires your constant attention for even the most basic tasks as autofocus. So in my opinion, just the ability to get the shot every time is really valuable. One thing I was concerned about was the battery. So when you're shooting with the EOS R, right, it's always using battery when it's on, because either you're looking through the viewfinder up here, or the screen is on and the sensor is always working. Now when you compare this with a DSLR, the only thing that's using battery is the top screen, and even then that goes on standby after a while. When you're looking through the viewfinder and you're composing your shot, you're not using battery. Compared with the EOS R, the light's coming in through the lens, received by the sensor, translated onto the electronic viewfinder, and then it's reaching your eyes. So that takes up an enormous amount of battery power by comparison. And I was kind of concerned that, after a few hours, I was just going to have a dead battery. And I was thinking, like, am I going to have to buy loads of spares? And just so you know, this camera takes LP-E6 or LP-E6N batteries. Now the LP-E6N from Canon is £70, and that is mental. So I was a bit worried that I was just going to have to end up spending like £140 on spare batteries just to get through a day of shooting. But Last night, shooting for about 4 hours, lots of long exposures, lots of filming, lots of just the camera being on standby with the screen on, and the camera battery is even still, it's registering at 3/4 full, so that's pretty good. That gives me hope that this camera, you know, moderate use will last a full day. I do wish that there was like a screensaver mode or something. I'm sure there is, I just haven't really delved into the settings. Let's get into the real big one, the electronic viewfinder. One of the things that I like about a viewfinder, like a typical viewfinder, the camera can just sit idle. With an electronic viewfinder, the battery's always just being used and it's a bit annoying, and I'm going to be honest now, the electronic viewfinder is not great. Looking through the viewfinder is just a bit disappointing. It's a bit fuzzy, particularly when you're looking at a darker scene. It lags around a bit as you move the frame. I can't explain it, it kind of warbles and vibrates. It looks like the refresh rate of the screen isn't particularly high because it's just like juttering. I believe the technical term for the quality of this EVF is it's just a bit poopy. I don't need to see what the exposure is going to look like. What I want through the viewfinder is pure composition and framing. I'm so used to that clarity from a proper viewfinder that the EVF actually makes my eye throw up a little bit in its mouth. Another thing too as well is normally on a DSLR you shoot an image and the image is then popped onto the screen if you want to look at it, but if you don't, the viewfinder, it doesn't show you anything. The viewfinder is just ready to take another image. But with an EVF, or specifically the Canon EOS R's EVF, when you take an image, for a split second, the image pops up on the screen. The camera's like, hey, before you take another photo, just look at this photo that you've just taken for slightly too long. And I'm like, no, I don't want to see the photo I've just taken through the viewfinder. I want to see it on the screen if I want to look at it. Otherwise, I want to take another photo. So get rid of the photo that I'm looking at. What I don't understand is they have this light bar here so that when you bring your eye up to the viewfinder, the viewfinder turns on. Why not have it set so that if the viewfinder is being used, don't display the image through the viewfinder? It seems really simple to me. If you pull away, so if you take a shot, click, and then you pull away, then the camera knows that you're not using the viewfinder, so then display the image on the screen. You know, I don't understand why they wouldn't have done that. I think it's really important to say this. I'm getting myself worked up about it. You know, in practice, out in the field, you know, shooting light trails, sunsets, framing precariously over the edge of a cliff, I didn't really miss the viewfinder that much because the camera's on the tripod and the screen is really bloody good. So it doesn't really matter as much as you might expect. But I guess a more accurate depiction of my thoughts on the EVF are, this is mildly annoying and a very slight inconvenience, and I'll have to make a small adaptation to the way I use the camera to accommodate this minor irritation. I would say if you're like me, you're like a landscape photographer or a macro photographer or someone who doesn't need the viewfinder to just be like, then you're fine. The viewfinder is fine, you get used to it. But if you are someone who you need to be constantly shooting and reframing and the viewfinder is always available, this image display in the viewfinder is honestly a huge problem. It means that you'll miss the shot and you can't afford to do that. I don't know what it's like with other viewfinders. I don't know about like the Sony series or the Nikon's mirrorless cameras or even like Fuji. I would be really hesitant to get the camera because of this delay. If anyone knows of a fix for this, if there's a setting that I'm missing, I would really value dropping a comment below just so I can fix this. Okay, I feel bad for having such a big go at the EVF. So last night when I was using the camera and it was pitch black and I needed to change settings, I was stood there looking at my camera going, right, what button do I need to press to get to the setting that I need to change? Because of how compact the camera is now, all of the settings buttons that I'm used to have been moved onto the screen. So on the 5D2, all of the settings, there's 4 buttons on the top that allow you to change like white balance, ISO, drive mode, focus mode. And you click the button and then you scroll the wheel and that changes the setting. On the EOS R, everything is now on the back screen. So, you know, yeah, you can change the shutter speed and the aperture and the ISO with these wheels, but everything else you have to click a button on the screen. And I guess it's just getting used to that. Now, normally you'd have all of that information available on the top screen, but to get that information now, you have to look through the viewfinder and it's displayed in the top corners. If you look on the back screen, however, you have to keep hitting the info button to get the information you need. So, you know, you have your settings on one screen like this, and you have just sort of basic information, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, but then if you want to know like your drive mode, stuff like that, you have to press it again, it's all there. But if you want to change it, you have to press the Q button, which is here, and then you have to click the button that you want and change the drive mode here. Then you have to press the return button to save it, and then if you want to, you know, not see it on the screen, you have to press the button again, and then you have to go through the, like, it's just a bit of a faff. The back screen is just really busy, and I'm talking like Northern Line at 8:45 in the morning busy. It's just, there's so much going on, and that is a beautiful segue into this touch bar. This touch bar sucks. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know why you would have a touch bar when you could just instead have two buttons that achieve exactly the same thing. The use of the touch bar, as far as I understand it, is to change the ISO, right? So you have a wheel for the shutter speed, a wheel for the aperture, touch bar for the ISO. With these wheels, they're very tactile. They have a feedback, so that's 3, all right, and 3 equals 1 stop. With the ISO, you have this touch bar, and it changes on the screen. I can't tell you the number of times that I overshot the ISO. I would end up having to go back. I ended up just stopping using it and changing the ISO on the screen instead. So let's just get it up here. So I click the nope, so I'm on the wrong setting. There we go. Oh, for goodness sake. There we go. ISO. So I changed the ISO to 800 on here, and then I'd hit return, because otherwise I couldn't be accurate enough on here when I'm in a rush, and that's just not good. On top of that, there were many times when I was sort of moving the camera around and I'd accidentally brushed the ISO bar, and as you can see, I've just adjusted the ISO by a stop. I don't know what else I would use it for. Maybe scrolling through photos, but again, you have like buttons that you can scroll through, which are just a better experience. Yeah, I just don't really get it. I don't know why they have it. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool, but actually using it, it's just not very good. I would say that I'm probably going to disable it entirely, if I can figure out how. Okay, on to the positives. So the articulating screen is really good. I really like it. So the screen can sort of move around, and you know, yesterday, for example, I was at a bit of an odd angle, so I used the screen like this, and I was moving the camera and I could see the representation there. Likewise, if I want to film myself, I can have the screen pointing at me, and I can see myself and I can frame myself properly. That's really important. You know, if it's like high up, then you can sort of tilt the screen down and you know, look at the viewfinder from below. The only thing I've noticed, which is a bit of annoyance, is when I'm using the L bracket, which is all the time, I can't tilt the screen because the screen bashes into the L bracket. And now originally I thought that this wasn't Canon's fault, but I've changed my mind on that. They must know that photographers use L brackets, and they must know that those L brackets are usually universal. Now, it's one thing to design your camera entirely around using universal L brackets. You obviously can't do that. So things like, you know, the mic plugins, USB plugins, you can't say, oh, everyone's going to be using a universal L bracket, so we have to put this in a different place. That's stupid. But to have a feature that is completely prohibited by an L bracket, I don't know, it just seems like a poor design choice to me. But I don't know, I might just be being picky. And I mean, I like the articulating screens of like the Sony Alpha, where it articulates sort of down and around like that, or you know, you can sort of, it articulates like this. I mean, it's fine, it's really, really good. I still really like it, and I'm still going to get a hell of a lot of use out of it. Okay, another positive is the bulb mode timer. It is a game changer, boys and girls. The bulb mode timer is when you set your camera to bulb mode, there we go, and then you navigate to the menu and you go to your bulb timer and you click enable, and then you hit that, and then you can set your timer. So if you want, you can set a 3.5 hour timer, and your camera will just shoot for 3.5 hours. I guess it would be good for things like astrophotography. If you've got your camera on a tracker and you just set the timer, you're like, I want a 3-hour exposure, the camera's going to move on the tracker, shooting the whole time, and it's going to be marvelous. But this is a game changer. It means I don't have to plug in a remote. In fact, I don't even have to buy a remote unless I want it for sort of like an intervalometer or something. I can just say, okay, I want a 2-minute exposure, set it there, shoot. It means I don't have to time it on my watch. I don't have to have a remote dangling, which could affect the stability of the camera. It's just a very, very cool feature. The only problem is it's a little bit of a faff to get to. You have to set your camera to bulb, then you have to go into the menu, then you have to set the bulb timer. I don't know why they wouldn't just have it as like, so on manual mode they have the shutter speed here, okay, but then you switch it to bulb mode and the shutter speed disappears. I don't know why they wouldn't just put a little button here, which is a shortcut to the bulb timer. That seems like a no-brainer to me, because obviously if I'm going to be shooting bulb, I want there to be a timer involved. A little bit of an oversight, but nonetheless the bulb timer is a very cool feature, something that I will be using a lot. To summarise the usability of the camera, I mean, most of my grievances come from the fact that I'm not used to it. I've spent the last, I think, 13 years using cameras that had exactly the same body and the exact same function. So the 40D, the 5D and the 5D2, they're all basically the same. They function exactly the same. So I know those cameras like the back of my hand. I can change the settings without looking at the camera, and I can change them accurately. But the EOS R is new, and I guess it's got whole new features, it's got a whole new body, whole new button layout, menu settings, etc. To judge and discredit the EOS R because I'm not used to it isn't really fair. There are two things that I would say are genuinely poorly designed, and that is the delay in the electronic viewfinder when you take a picture, and the touch bar. The rest of it is just me being like, it's new and I don't understand it, so it sucks. Like, it's a good camera. I just, I got to get used to using it first. Alright, we made it. It's the grand event, the thing you've all been waiting for. It's the main course. Are the images good? And the answer is, yeah, pretty good. I'm not going to pixel peep. I just don't do it. If you think about how images are viewed, if you're lucky enough and talented enough to have your images hanging in a gallery, people aren't going to be going up close and inspecting and going, it's a bit noisy in the shadows. Most of your work is going to be displayed on a screen, probably at 1920 by 1080, and again, people aren't going to be zooming in to look at the shadows and look at the chromatic aberration and da-da-da-da-da. Even if someone's looking on a phone, like, it's again going to be like 1080p resolution, maybe higher if you've got a newer phone, and it's going to be like 5 to 7 inches across. Like, and they're going to be looking at it for, what, like 3 seconds? Like, oh, that's a nice photo, tap, tap, scroll. Like, no one's going to be pixel peeping. Ultimately, photography is about evoking an emotional response with an image. Can I get across what I want to get across with this camera? The answer is emphatically yes. The reason I got this camera, amongst the improvements to usability, video performance, autofocus, is dynamic range. It has the ability to capture and retain more information across the spectrum of tones. So that means that if you shoot an image that has a very dark area and a very light area, the camera is able to capture detail in both, and you're able to sort of balance it out a little bit and bring back those dark areas which might not have the same amount of detail. And this is really important because it means that it reduces the need to blend exposures and it reduces the need to use filters. Now, some photographers will be like, you have to use a filter, but you don't. You can't reproduce in Photoshop the thing that you can achieve with a neutral density filter. But when it comes to like a graduated filter that enables you to darken the sky, you can just easily reproduce that in post. Alright, let's jump onto the computer and take a look at some images in Lightroom. So as I said, I'm not really much of a pixel peeper, I'm just kind of looking to see what I can get. Here's a shot of Cheddar Gorge, looking down into the gorge. What you'll notice is, looking at the histogram, we have a lot in the shadows and a lot in the whites, and not really anything in the midground. So this is an example of when I might want to pull up the shadows and then pull back the highlights. It looks blown out, basically this entire area looks like it's just pure white, but just bringing the highlights down and you get this beautiful sunset with these God rays and the definition of the clouds. Alright, let's see what happens if we pull up the shadows. So let's get that back to 0. So pulling up the shadows, I mean, it's grainy, which is understandable really, because essentially this was pretty dark, and so pulling it up to be this level of brightness is quite good actually. And again, if you're just looking at this on a regular screen, this is perfectly usable. You know, no one's going to be zooming in going, oh, this rock looks a bit fuzzy. I would perhaps drop a sort of graduated filter here, and I might use this just to drop the exposure ever so slightly and the highlights ever so slightly, but I don't want it to look unnatural. I really feel like when you drop the highlights like this, it just looks stupid. So just the slightest little bit of detail there, that's nice. And then for the rest of the image, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently bring up the shadows, gently bring up the blacks, and I'm probably going to adjust the curve here as well. So I'm just going to pull up the midtones, just drop that down. Okay, so this is just a really quick basic edit. I'm definitely not going to keep it like this, but it's just worth seeing what information was captured by the camera. So let's grab a virtual copy here. So if you compare these two images, the amount of detail that I've been able to bring out of the image here is really quite nice. I'm really quite impressed. Now the thing is, could I have done this with a 5D2? Honestly, probably, yeah. But nonetheless, it's good to know that the camera has the capability if needed. So let's go on to a bit more of a dramatic image. This was shot a bit later on in the evening when the light had completely gone. We have the local town with the lights lit up there. The sun's left the sky completely. Now let's just see exactly what can be brought back from this image. That is absolutely astonishing. Now again, you zoom right in, it's grainy, it's noisy, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, if you screw up your exposure, look at what you can pull back from the image. So looking at a couple more images here. So this is an example of just pulling back a little bit of detail from the sky, just balance the white balance there as well. And another image here, again, if we just pull up, I know that as soon as I pull up these shadows, it's all going to pop into view. Look at that. So what I'd really want is probably a bit more like this, just a bit more balanced and a bit darker there. Probably drop the highlights a little bit as well. But yeah, just having a play and just seeing what the camera is capable of doing. At the end of the day, if you're, say for example, a portrait photographer, or you know, a wedding photographer or an event photographer, you can get away with this, you know. Quite impressed with this. I very much look forward to seeing what I can get back from an image. There have been many times when I've accidentally blown out the sky, but everything else in the frame is really nice, and that's not too bad because you can just shoot another frame and you can just blend the exposures. But being able to just retain this level of detail is just pretty good. Very cool. What I can answer are the following questions. Did this camera's dynamic range enable me to save photos? Yes. Does this camera have exceptional autofocus? Yes. Is the video functionality of this camera amazing? Yes. Is the image quality of this camera good? Yes. Is the lens more important when it comes to image quality? Yes. Will this camera help me get better images by being more forgiving, lighter, and more advanced in its feature set? Yes. Am I pleased with this camera? Emphatically, yes. I'm going to be heading out to the Lake District in a week's time, and I'm really going to put the camera through its paces. You know, I spent 3 hours shooting last night, so it's a bit short to get a proper understanding of everything I like and dislike about the camera and how it all works. But as it stands, this is a good camera. I like this camera. Out of 10, I give this camera a score of good camera. If you've enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more nonsensical wafflings and average landscape photography, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And finally, if you'd like to mindlessly scroll past my photos on Instagram, then you can follow me at Sean_DTP. I hope you have an awesome day, and see you next time.